Hey, you savages and mother lovers alike. Welcome to Greg Medford Show. I'm your host here in Phoenix, Arizona. Today is a non-political show. So those of you who've been wading through all the politics, trying to get to the stuff that's non-political, today's a non-political show. We may talk some politics. We may stumble across, because any red, white, and blue, red-blooded American who's ever gone to a foreign land doing the bidding of our nation, who isn't pissed off right now, is fucking brain dead. So we may stumble across some interesting political topic, and we may rip it for a few minutes. I have an interesting guest today. He's traversed two branches of the United States military, been all over the globe in dark corners, and has made a really interesting kind of tier one move, which you don't see. I mean, I've never actually even heard of it. So it's kind of cool. Our guest today is Michael Rutledge. Mike is a former Navy SEAL. He also flew Special Operations in the Army. Is that how you say it?
That's correct.
And then now he is a, believe it or not, he's a barnstorming firefighter. We'll talk a bunch with him today about the details. Mike, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in.
It sounds like it's going to get spicy.
Thanks, Greg. So let's give everybody just the really quick onesie. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Galesburg, Illinois, small little farm town about 3 hours southeast or southwest of Chicago.
Did you grow up swimming?
No. As a matter of fact, I was an unathletic fat band kid.
Fat band kid.
To be truth, to give you the visual.
Okay, that's perfect. And then you ended up stumbling into the Navy after high school?
I did. Well, sort of. I actually did become athletic around sophomore year of high school. I was pretty good at football. Went to a Division I college for football and lasted an entire semester.
Where'd you go for school?
Actually went to Iowa State University.
State.
Apparently you got to go to class.
So weird.
So I thought you could just go for football.
Fucking unreasonable.
Yeah. So they asked me to leave end of the first semester and finished that first year at a community college that my mom worked at. Was the only way I could get in because she worked there. And so that was in 1990. So of course,
okay.
I'm a product of the original Top Gun era. I'm like, I'm going to go fly F-14s, not knowing any of the complexities involved with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the short version, well, I'm sure we'll get into the deeper ones, but I thought I was going to fly F-14s. No, I wasn't. I ended up being an aircrew member on a helicopter, a CH-46 helicopter in Desert Storm, and delivering cheese balls and sodas back and forth to carrier. Anyway, I did that for...
That was my neck of the woods.
Yeah.
And helicopters that were all older than us.
Yeah. And so I did that for about 2 years, and one day I saw these guys get off the helicopter with, long wavy blonde hair and big muscles and just wearing shorts, and I'm like, who are those guys? I'm like, if they're in our Navy, I want to do that job. So that was long before the internet or email or phones or, and there's exactly 1 or 2 books published on Vietnam SEALs.
Right.
And that's all I had. In fact, I read this book called SEAL Team 1 by Dick Couch. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go do that. And I signed up to go to BUD/S. And then lo and behold, 8 months later, I walked through the door of BUD/S and graduated in 94.
That was before it was cool.
That was before there was any media, before it was cool.
Well, that was before it was the how to get a book deal.
Yeah. There wasn't. All there was were some Vietnam
there was
vets,
Marchenko and a couple other guys, right?
Now Marchenko was the originator of self-promoting. For better or worse. But Commander Marchenko, he had some pretty good stuff, and there was a element of his books that were real.
Kardashian of the Special Forces community.
He was. He actually was before it was cool. But a lot of people forget that he actually was a legendary operator.
Yeah.
Before he decided for glitz and glamour and make it get an agent. I mean, he was a legendary operator.
I mean, good for him.
He changed the face of the community.
Right.
Anyway, but yeah, his book Red Cell came out, or no, I'm sorry, whatever the first one was, Rogue Warrior.
Yeah, Rogue Warrior.
And I'm like a 19-year-old E3 reading it. I'm like, shit, that's what I got to do.
Oh, I know.
So that was, like I said, that was for the age of the internet. So anyway, went through BUD/S. And I graduated in class 197 and went to SEAL Team 1 and spent a number of years there. Did 3 deployments there. One as a team leader or a
Where'd you go?
leading petty officer. Well, at that time, the SEAL teams were geographically oriented.
Yeah.
So SEAL Team 1 had Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
SEAL Team 3 had the desert because there really wasn't any desert going on. SEAL Team 5 had Korea and some other areas. And so, man, for a kid from Iowa or Iowa/Illinois, I spent a lot of time in Asia.
Yeah.
That was before there's really any war to fight and all that. So lots and lots of time training. And then late 90s, we started doing quite a bit of, I did do one amphibious ready group deployment with the Marines. And that was pretty enlightening because there were some contentious stuff there. We were doing non-compliant shipboardings for, Iraqi flag vessels. And
were you doing that with Marines? Was it a joint thing?
No, it wasn't joint.
Okay.
It was just us. There was one SEAL platoon based on a flat top USS. I can't even remember the name of it now, but Bellawood, I believe.
Oh, that's one of the chopper
LHAs.
carriers.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that was a pretty good experience. And then
for those of you who don't know, the Marine Corps has got some boats that are kind of like aircraft carriers, but they're not for jets. They're not for that kind of deep water jet operation. They're to get like a MEU in theater real fast.
Yeah, and a SEAL platoon is just a tiny little capable piece of that. I mean, we interoperate, with the Marines, but some standalone missions. But
how did you like across the different communities? Everyone's got their preference. I like working with these guys. Like I've had friends of mine who were civilian sniper schools that did real specialized sniper training that had military teams come through, and they said the Marines always got too drunk when they came out. The Army guys were super profesh. I mean, did you have any funny generalizations?
You got to remember, because my theory on leadership being on teams is whatever team you're on is the best and everyone else sucks. Like that should be. I don't care what team it is.
Yeah.
If you don't think you're the best and everyone else blows, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So that being said, when you're in the SEAL teams, you're like, well, everyone else is subpar and they suck. Now, further on the story, when I get to be fairly senior in the Army and I'm flying the 160th and I'm flying every tier 1 unit, you have a little broader perspective and you grow up. Your perspective from 24 or 25 is much different when you're 45.
Maybe a little less tribal.
Yeah. A little more, okay, well, perhaps I was a jackass, So there is some of that. That's almost a podcast in itself because, not to be non-committal, but I've had such a good time with all the operators from all the services. I mean, I could sit here and go down a list of 10 and 10 of goods and bads of, the MARSOC guys, the Ranger Regiment, the Special Forces guys or CAG guys, just write down the list and they're pretty even. And now that I've got, 2 sons that are actually active duty now, I got one that's going through Green Platoon to fly MH-47s for the 160th of the captain. I got another one who's an infantryman who just got back from Syria. So my perspective now is that, I'm not so divisive about the particular units now, like whatever, Rangers are better, SF's better. What I have realized is the dudes and the dudettes that frequent those units are all the same. It's just a different flavor of the same game. Quite frankly, the guys who are in the Ranger Regiment, if they knew how to swim, would do just fine in buds.
Right.
Right. The team guys, if they could ever learn how to do land nav, would do pretty well at the Ranger Regiment or so on. So I think it's a much less territorial capability thing, and it's a lot more heart. It's just serving in special operations requires a very different mentality, and I don't think it matters necessarily what uniform you're wearing.
Cool. So you spent a certain amount of time SEAL Team 1. How long were you there for?
Yeah, about 8 years.
And then is that where you made this miraculous transition over to the Army?
It is. I actually was instructing at the time, and I left.
Give us so you were a cadre teaching there over in Coronado or something. Yeah. Give us a little bit of just give us the one page on how you made that crazy transition, because like I was saying earlier, there's, I don't know, you probably know what the number is, and I don't know what the inflation adjusted number is, but government's got a couple $1 million into a fully trained operational SEAL.
Yeah, you got to remember, I was pretty senior at the time too. I wasn't
right. You were 10 years in, so. Yeah. You're halfway in your career.
12 years in.
Okay. So, this is someone who's got a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of experience. And usually they don't say, oh, okay, well, now you can go be a PR person in D.C.
Here's the deal. If I ever, and I kind of laugh because they say team guys always write books. If I were to ever write a book, it would be called pivotal people, because no kidding, it's a lot less about me, but I can pick in every point of my career one person that said yes when everyone else said no, and it changed the course of my entire life. And that was actually one of those. So you got to remember, we just got back from the first deployment after 9/11. The Navy had a stop loss for all kinds of pilots, SEALs, EOD, because they were foreseeing this big elongated combat operations.
And they got it right.
Yeah, and they did, and they were not wrong about that. So me not knowing all this, while I'm actually on this deployment, I've submitted all this stuff to transfer over to the Army to be a warrant officer helicopter pilot. And the
what
reason,
made you want to do that?
well, you got to remember, I came from a flying family to start with. So, I mean,
Okay.
aviation was always in my deal. I originally wanted to be a pilot and ended up on a helicopter, shoving cargo out the back. So I was a little disillusioned. So I'm like, oh, hell, I'll go be a SEAL. So I don't want to say it was a consolation prize. It ended up being a very long detour, but a detour nonetheless. So, I mean, I always still wanted to fly. I was too old to get in, at that time, I was too old to get in flight school in the Navy. The Army was wavering everything because they were also anticipating high attrition rate for pilots.
Yep.
So
How old were you at the time when you made the transition?
I think I was 30 or 31 at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty old.
Yeah.
in
Long
those
in the
days.
tooth for pilots.
Yeah. 27 was the cutoff for the Navy. Anyway, so I was still flying as a civilian when I was in SEAL teams. So I was towing banners, towing gliders.
Out
I
on
was,
the beach there. And,
Yeah, in Cornell or San Diego. I was flying out of Gillespie Field towing banners.
I love Gillespie.
Yeah.
That's one of my fun little favorite airports to fly out of.
And Skydive Elsinore, they used to give us jump tickets to go up there and jump. And I would give my buds all my jump tickets, and I'd go next door and tow gliders. So because at that time, believe it or not, I was like, I think I want to be a crop duster when I get out of the Navy. I ended up doing it till 20 years later. But anyway, so when we're overseas, we're working with these 160th guys. And one guy, his name's CW4 Star, and he's since long retired. I'm like, hey, how do I come fly for the 160th? I didn't want to be an Army pilot. I wanted to be a 160th pilot. And he gave me this quick thing. He's like, well, hey, I'm going back. I'm going to be the regiment, assessment or recruiting officer. And he gave me his information. And
Is he your pivotal guy?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, not yet, but he was my first contact with it.
Okay.
Anyway, so I started submitting all this stuff to him, and it was a relatively easy process. One of those points in that process was you had to get a conditional release from your service. So imagine we just got back.
That's the hard one, though, right? Like that's the one you're like, what?
Army's like, yeah, we'll take you. So it was all approved. And then I had to hand walk, because that was before computers. Well, I won't say before, but emails about all you were doing.
Yeah.
So I had to hand walk this to my command master chief and my CO, who's Commander Tom Carlson, or I can't remember his first name, Tom, but last name was Carlson. I remember that. And
that's
all the chiefs and master to go locker at SEAL Team 1 said, fuck no, we are not letting you go. So everybody said no.
Were they pissed?
They weren't pissed. It was just like, hey, we got a lot of stuff going on.
Well, how about tell me do you remember how you were feeling as you're going to tell the first one?
Well, I honestly was excited to fly, and I didn't, if you get to know anything about me, I didn't expect them to fully support me. And I just asked, hey, I don't expect you to like it. Just don't thwart me.
Right.
I was pretty respectful about it, and I had a good reputation as a team. So, there was probably more remorseful of,
don't want to
you're
lose
impactful. We don't want to lose you.
Yeah.
Never once was anybody a jackass to me. And people ask like, oh, were they bitter? Never once was anyone, obstructive.
So they were cool.
Yeah. They were totally cool. And, truth be told, a lot of them like, dude, I wish I'd have thought of that,
They're like really cool, but no.
Yeah. So anyway, so the CO ended up saying yes, and I screwed that up a little bit. Commander Carlson had since left SEAL Team 1, and I had a great relationship with him. And he had gone up to DC, and he was in charge of all the SEALs. He was the SEAL community manager.
Okay.
So my CO had said yes. It went to DC, and up 3 levels, I got to watch it. 3 levels, it got denied, 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 and then it had to go to him for final approval. And I only know that it went this way because I got it back, and it had all these no.
Yes.
And it got to Captain Carlson, yes. So he basically usurped all the no's. And no kidding, that was in January of 2002, I think. And then June of 2002, all the processing and stuff, I walked down to the Army recruiter as a Navy, or the MEP station as a Navy E7, and they swore me in. And the next day I'm an Army E7. I pack up my family, my 1-year-old kid, and we trucked to Fort Rucker, Alabama to check in for Warrant Officer Candidate School. It was that fast.
Wow. It's it's kind of bananas. And so that's like political capital or personal capital that paid off from years of busting your ass.
Yeah, if you're a shitbag, you're not going to get that kind of treatment.
Because he had already left. You guys are parted. He's over here doing his other thing, and he just sees a name come across his desk of one of his guys.
Yeah, and I never spoke to him. It wasn't a personal like, hey, sir,
you didn't
can you help me
favor,
out?
Right.
So I would love to say it's because I thought I was such an awesome operator. That likely wasn't the case. I think it was more of somebody saying, sure, or why not, instead of no. There's so many people that are spring-loaded for no.
Yeah.
Because it's easier. It's easier to say no than it is to have to justify saying, yeah, sure.
People are risk-averse as hell.
Absolutely.
So did you ever get a chance to thank him?
I did. So my Buds class reunion was about 5 or 6 years ago. Well, I'll back that up. In 2005, went to Dam Neck for the memorial for Extortion 17. And he was there, obviously, like 3/4 of the SEAL teams were there. And I was in my dress blues, Army uniform, with my wings and my trident and all that. And he was there. And that was the first time I got to thank him, because of course we're all drunk. Seems like the opportune time to go up to a captain and say, hey, thanks, sir. But he obviously remembered me, and he's like, it seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
Oh man.
And
just a whim. Just imagine.
Yeah. And I can't imagine all the pressure he was under, and then fast forward around 2014 or 15, we had our 20-year Buds class reunion in Coronado. And part of that was, you sit there and you witness whatever the nearest Buds class graduation is. And so we got to watch that, and he was there, and he was retired, but he was there to see someone else. And I was like, hey, sir, do you remember me? He goes, hell yeah, I remember you. So I got to actually thank him twice, because that time I was a Chief Warrant Officer 4. I'd been in like 27 years, and it was a very appropriate time for both of us. He was old and retired. I'm getting old, and anyway, so that was fairly special. So very pivotal guy, and there's probably 4 other ones prior to him that more had to do with my upbringing to get to that point. But career-wise, talk about a pivotal guy. He said yes, and he could have just said no, and it was easier, and pretended to not even know my name. I was an E6 or E7 at the time. I would have never seen him. I have no recourse. There was no appeal process for that.
Right. Cool. So you get over to the Army, and are you in at that point? The warrant officer pilot training is generally filled with reasonably hot enlisted guys who are making that move, or is it a bunch of green people?
It's like half and half.
It's okay.
It's
the warrant officer thing's so off my radar because I only saw in the Marine Corps like 2 warrant officers the entire time I was in.
I mean, just again, that almost deserves its own chapter, but I will say the warrant officer concept for the Army, at least as far as flying goes, is one of the most untapped. I mean, it is the hidden secret of the military. If you like flying, if you don't like flying, it's not going to be your jam.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's amazing. But the funny part is you got to remember, so I transferred to the Army and I just spent 12 years bad-mouthing the Army. I'm like, you guys suck. You're a bunch of goobers, and I went through every Army school. I went through Airborne, Pathfinder, Free Fall, Breacher. I spent half my time going to Army schools. And so here I am, like in the middle of the Army. So I quickly learned, all right, I can't make fun of them anymore because I am them. But, I had to do 8 weeks or 9 weeks of Warrant Officer Canada School, which is just people, guys and girls from all over the Army, regular Army. And I'm sitting there getting my ass handed to me every day in Southern Alabama in July, 90 degrees, 100% humidity. Yeah. But it wasn't hard. It was just tedious. So I graduated from that and then immediately started flight school. And there was a push. Like at that time, they were trying to pump pilots through. So sometimes it could be a 2-year process now, but from the time I started Warrant Officer Canada School till the time I got wings and reported the 160th, I think it was 12 or 13 months.
That's fast.
I mean, it was fast.
Yeah.
They were just pumping them out. And
then how long from when you graduated until you went downrange?
Well, I graduated flight school, reported direct to the 160th, and I actually assessed for the 160th while I was in flight school, which is a little bit of a humorous story. Nobody's ever done that. Assessed while I was still in flight school with no wings. They had orders for me. So as soon as I graduated, I went back up to Fort Campbell, immediately started Green Platoon, which is like the mission specific for your aircraft and mission. And as soon as I graduated that, 9 days later, I got off a C-17 in Bagram, Afghanistan, and was flying right seat as a basic mission qualified co-pilot on my first assault.
What equipment?
MH-47 Chinook, with the best man for my wedding, who was from SEAL Team 6. That was my first assault.
Oh, you were bringing SEAL someplace.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, little side note. I mean, it wasn't but a year and a half when I left the teams where the guys I just left, flying them on direct action assaults all the time. So that was kind of a cool tie-in.
Very cool. Very cool. How long was that school? Did you say Green Platoon?
It was about 6 months, 6 or 7 months.
Is that everyone's first school, like first kind of unit specific? Here, you're ready to be in the unit now that you have your wings. Now you have to do this, or
well, when the guys come, I was an anomaly. You got to remember, I had no experience. I mean, no aviation experience to speak of. I had civilian time, like 500 or 600 hours.
Yeah.
So I knew how to fly airplanes, I knew how to talk on the radio and all that. But the complexity, particularly of the MH-47, I mean, it's so complex. It's beyond the scope of the podcast. But the system management in the aircraft, the actual flying, the assault they're doing, the environmentals, and then the actual mission stuff is it's tailored for graduate level stuff. Like guys been flying in the Army for 5, 6, 7 years, lots of pilot and command time, maybe a couple deployments. It is not tailored for somebody who has 200 hours in a helicopter. Yet there I was. So to say it was overwhelming in a fire hose is definitely an understatement.
Okay.
It was tough. I won't lie. I'm like, there was a few times I'm like, as good as a pilot as I thought I was at the time. The peripheral stuff, like I said, the mission management, understanding the complexities of the mission planning and all that, was melting my brain on a daily basis. But again, I had some good guys that I was going through class with that helped me, and they recognized, my strength is understanding the soft mission. My strength at that point was not being a super experienced aviator. So it kind of, and there was a couple other guys. There was a couple of guys straight out of flight school. One guy from the Ranger Regiment. Actually, there was a couple guys from the Ranger Regiment. So
guys
we were
had
sort of
cool
the same
operational experience, but they just didn't have this part of the operation.
Yeah, and the 160 it still does that to an extent, on a limited basis. If you have a fairly extensive special operations background from as a ground guy or girl, they'll bring you in, and it actually does, mixing that flavor of having some guys that have spent time on the ground with guys that are very experienced Army aviators. It makes a pretty nice blend.
I can see that
within the
being
company.
valuable.
Yeah, it's a different perspective. Not every pilot's an ex-operator.
Because you can think door kicker and
or be able
fly.
to relay. They're like, hey, what are we going to do about this? I'm like, well, when we breached, you probably need to be 8 or 15 feet away or something like that.
Right.
Plus, every guy or girl on the ground likes to know that, in every flight, there's probably at least one ex-operator up there. Whether that really makes a difference or not isn't the point. When you're kicking doors, you'd like to know that there's somebody up there who understands your flight.
Speaks your universe, yeah. How long did you do that for?
I did that for 14 years.
Okay. And did you mandatory out, or how come you got out?
No, I didn't mandatory out. In fact, I don't even think there is such a thing. There's W5s that are in there, they just stay forever. It was, I had kids at the time, our boys, and I was still gone, 7, 8 months out of the year. And when you're home, you're not really home. You're on a training trip somewhere, or you got to get this 6-week school at Rucker. So you're never actually home. And it was starting to take a toll because my boys were, 10, 12, 13, something in that. So I was at 27 years at that point, and another Night Stalker who was a legendary flight lead. He actually just wrote a book called Razor 03, a guy named Al Mack, who taught me a lot. I mean, he mentored me a lot in the 47s. He had gone on and left the regiment, and he was the commander at 2nd Aviation Detachment at West Point, the Executive Flight Detachment. And that had traditionally always been a Night Stalker in command of that. Because, you fly the superintendent, you're flying heads of state, congressmen, senators, all that. So it's very, very high visibility. And he called me up in between deployments and said, hey, do you want to come up and command? Do you want to take over for me? I'm going to retire. Do you want to come up and command at West Point? So it was pretty easy. I called my wife. It was like a 5-minute conversation. I said, hey, do you want to go to West Point for our last 3 years, which would take us to 30 years? And she said, yeah. It was probably a little more in depth than that. That's just what I remember. And I called him back and said, hey, we'll do it. And it was a pretty tedious process leaving the regiment, obviously, at that point. We were excited to get out and just have some time at home and like a normal life.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard leaving the regiment. A lot harder than I thought it would be. Like you're excited to get out because the moment you're like, this sucks. you spend every deployment saying, I'd rather be doing anything but this. I'm wasting my life. And of course I did 16 deployments. So I had lots of time to think about how much it sucked. But the minute you walk out the door, it's kind of like playing hooky at home. You think it's a great idea to your home, and then you realize all your friends are having fun. So that's, it was a little bit of remorse, but we went to West Point. It was an honor to be there. That place is it's an amazing American institution.
Yeah.
People are human.
Part of the country too. Up there.
People are human. They screw stuff up, but what they attempt to teach there, it's truly all American. And one, you got to imagine, so a Navy SEAL commanding anything at West Point, the place where they birth the finest military officers in America. And then, and I'm a warrant officer. I barely graduated high school, and now I'm commanding at an Ivy League institution. And I also taught military leadership and ethics, to senior cadets getting ready to graduate. So now I'm in a classroom teaching cadets amongst all of my peer instructors who are, masters, doctorates. And I don't think you're actually allowed to teach at West Point without a degree, but they didn't ask me. So I don't think I violated anything. If they'd asked me, I had to come clean. I'm like, no, I barely got through the public school system. So anyway, we retired from that in June of 2019 and moved to Indiana for 3 years. Like I said, it sounds kind of blue collar, but I could have done a ton of things. I always wanted to be a crop duster because I always wanted to fly big tailwheel airplanes, and that's where the big tailwheel airplanes live, is in ag aviation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And how long have you been doing that now for?
Well, I've actually done it since about 9 years. So I used to take, when I was in the 160th, I was senior enough, we did 60 days on, 60 days off, or 90 on, 90 off, depending on what the rotation was. So I would go and volunteer and take everyone's Christmas and Thanksgiving deployments. So I could take all my leave in the summer and go back to Illinois or Iowa or Indiana, wherever it was, and, fly crop dusters for 30 days, because that's about how long the season lasts.
So are you crop dusting now or firefighting?
Both.
You do both. Okay.
Yeah.
And your equipment can easily do water or chem.
Yep. They're different airplanes, same type airplane, but equipped differently.
Okay.
So, much to the dismay of my family, because you got to remember, now I spent what little vacation time I had every year, I spent it, working, and very supportive. Completely regret it now, though. Now that my kids are older, I'm like, I should have spent that last 4 summers hanging out with my family, instead of trying to, as a dad or husband, everybody can sympathize. You're like, well, I'm going to build a life. That's how you justify it. I'm going to build a life for my family, and it's an investment in our future and all that. I will tell you, that's my one thing I tell younger guys. I'm like, it's kind of bullshit, like if you really think about building this castle and all that kind of stuff. And then as we realize now, so my youngest is about ready to, he's actually starting college. So in essence, we're empty nesters for real. And you're like, okay, so all that stuff I worked with, it's just it's just now coming to fruition. And I'm like, why? My wife and I,
listen,
like,
man,
we could live in a 700 square foot apartment and stare at each other and be just as happy now.
We're almost, I don't know, what year were you born?
71.
Oh, so I'm a year older than you. We have just the same kind of thing. You build this life castle, and right about the time it comes together as a castle, everybody's flying the coop going to do their own thing. And then you go, oh, man, we don't really need this big house. What do we do all this for?
Yeah. Like, I don't want to mow 4 acres. I got no, the whole goal was to teach my kids how to work on machines and mow things, and now they're gone. So now I'm stuck mowing 4 acres.
Where do you?
Now I'm not Arizona, obviously, but
where do you find your pilots from?
The majority of my pilots right now are ex-military guys.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I generally don't like ex-military pilots, and I say that only because, the type of firefighting we do and the crop dusting stuff, it's very blue collar. So, there's no duty days, there's no safety parameters except what we have as a company, and you're not making money unless you're flying. So flying for a profit is a much different animal than military guys are used to. The deal, the government, we're not interested in making a profit on anything.
Right.
And we don't care what anything costs. So, particularly crop dusting, you're hot, you're dirty, you're flying Carhartt jeans and maybe a helmet and gloves, but very blue collar. If your airplane breaks, you got to get out and work on it, or else it's not making you money.
Right.
and most military pilots are not geared for that.
Right.
You know, there's a much easier lifestyle to be made doing something else, airlines, corporate, EMS, you know, something like that.
Yeah, the air show business was like that. Flying all those weird airplanes I flew, you know, you can't, hey, can you guys jump into my Vendenev M14 engine at the Cutter Aviation? No, they can't.
Yeah, but every once in a while, you'll find a guy who enjoys that type of flying, and you have to like that type of flying.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're flying 16,000 pound, 1,600 horsepower turbine tailwheel airplanes, biggest production single engine airplane in the world, at 160 miles an hour at 15 feet. So it has to be somebody who can live that lifestyle and also handle the airplane, which as a tailwheel pilot yourself, you understand you can't just pull somebody out of the street or out of Embry-Riddle or something like that. I mean, it's almost...
It's a lot of old-fashioned feel flying.
Yeah, and we've got a couple young guys flying for us. We basically had to groom them ourselves from zero time to do that. So anyway, they're not all military guys. We've got a couple other people from various backgrounds.
How many pilots do you have working for you?
You got 7 total.
Cool. Everybody here in Arizona?
No, actually they're spread all over because the nature of the business, they get mobilized and they just get a plane ticket and they'll go to wherever the airplane is, whatever tanker base, fire base it's at, or something like that.
Very cool.
We're pretty small now, so our HR motto is no assholes. and it seems to actually work pretty well.
Yeah.
We've publicly,
right up until you got about 50 people, and then it starts getting weird.
Yeah. I mean, I was told a long time ago, if you got people problems.
Yeah, for
which
sure.
Even in our little scope is true. But
hey Bobby, would you bring my drink in for me, please?
Ours.
Oh, Jesus, I forgot to get you some Macallan.
We told everybody in the company early on that, hey, we are going to limit growth to being able to find good people. I don't care, guys, girls, whatever.
Yours.
Thanks.
Oh, no.
Guys or girls to fly the airplanes and maintain them. I said, buying trucks and airplanes is the easy part. Finding decent people that are going to work well with each other and not create hate and discontent at a tanker base, or go get drunk or tear up that $1 million airplane. That's the hardest part. So that's what's limiting our growth is people.
For sure. And you said you guys are flying out of down in kind of other side of town.
South.
Yep.
Where things grow.
Yep. Very cool. Talk to us a little bit about the missions you went on during the Gulf Wars, the Mideast stuff we've had going on.
Well, I've gotten to see all of it, from a very junior perspective. I got to see the tail end of Desert Storm. We got to see Somalia, obviously not from the middle of Mogadishu perspective. We were sort of off the coast and coming, flying in and out of Mogadishu, but not downtown. So, and I was young enough where, whatever it was, 20 or something like that. I'm not sure I conceptualized all that was going on. And then, of course, there's nothing going on until 2001. I was actually deployed. I was a leading petty officer, a team leader. We're actually deployed in Sri Lanka, of all places, doing, recon on September 11th, 2001. So, when this was all going on in the States, we're huddled around this little 6-inch black and white TV in the lobby of this nasty little hotel, in Colombo, Sri Lanka, watching all this unfold.
Was it a holy shit moment?
Well, it was almost surreal. I mean, I remember it clearly, but, being in another country, again, not having internet and all that kind of stuff, the scope of trying to figure out what's going on. And of course, all we had was satellite communications back with the Special Warfare Unit and all that. And so trying to get information back and forth on what's going on, and of course, we're all thinking, all right, everyone's got to get deployed. We're all cocked and locked and all that. And it ended up being, honestly, several weeks just because airlift and communications was so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Trying to get people moved around. So by the time we actually got moved back and refitted and all that and tasked and all that, I mean, you're talking even a couple months or so.
It's a big machine to get moving.
Yeah, it is a big machine, and information moved well. I mean, a little side note with that was so every night, all we could watch was BBC on this little 6-inch black and white TV in the lobby of this nasty hotel. And so we're all sitting there watching, and the BBC guy goes on there and he's like, and America's got special operations forces spread all over the world to respond, blah, blah, blah. And he goes by every continent and says, these are what's all stationed there. And he says, in Sri Lanka, there are 2 platoons of Navy SEALs. And we kind of looked at each other because Sri Lanka is a pretty small country. Like, what the hell? So our team chief at the time, he's like, all right, everybody go back and pack everything up. And we did. I'll bet
He's like,
probably
we're
an
getting
hour.
out of here.
Because our rooms were, we had satellite comms sticking out the hotel door, rooms are all the ammo. Everybody's sleeping fully dressed every night, gunned up and stuff. And so we had two or three little minivans. So we're loading all this guns and ammo and comms equipment, all this stuff into these minivans and moving. And no kidding, as we're going out, guys are coming in, locals, like, where are the Navy SEALs? We know they're here. And what had happened was the ambassador, America's ambassador to Sri Lanka, of course, he's in the know because he knows who's in the country. I don't know if he thought he was going to get, points for, hey, this is what I have, in my territory. But he's the one who told everybody, we've got 2 platoons of Navy SEALs in Sri Lanka. Now 16, 220-pound, tall, blonde-haired white guys does not necessarily move around stealthily in Sri Lanka as it is. But at least we weren't out in public in daytime. And,
right.
But anyway, so he let the entire world know that we were there. So
Good job.
yeah. So we were, I don't know, I didn't remember the guy's name, but I did look him up. I'm like, you jackass.
Yeah.
So we were on the run for, kind of nomadic for a couple of days. And finally they're like, all right, hey, C-130 is going to come in at whatever time it was, 2 a.m, blacked out. And they did. A Navy C-130, rolled into this dirt strip and everything kept running, ramping. It actually was taxiing real slow and we're throwing boxes on the back, and then we collapsed all security and got on. And that's how we started the war. That was just to get it rolling. And that was, X amount, a couple weeks after the attacks.
Where'd you guys go from there?
Well, we went back and retrofitted and, everybody, they actually disseminated the whole platoon and everybody, because by the time we got back to the States, they had already decided, all right, of these 16 guys, we've already got platoons ready to go. And they're just dispersing them,
okay,
all the different stuff. And we had guys going, straight to go do Objective Rhino, guys going, believe it or not, to the Philippines, I mean, wherever there was, Islamic issues extremism going on, they were farmed out pretty quick. And I assume that was probably the same, for all the other forces and stuff like that. I mean, it was busy. And so when I say there was no remorse, there was a little remorse in the fact that the teams, I've been there for 10 years, just getting excited to go to war, which I would tell somebody now, do not be excited for it. Like, it's really cool for like the first 6 months. And then after that, 20 years is definitely too long. But, just as the teams were getting rolling, getting to do business that we'd trained for all these years, well, then I got what I wanted, and then I get sent to flight school for a year and a half. I ended up getting the bulk of it on the backside as a pilot.
Talk to me a little bit about the training evolutions. You've done lots of schoolhouses.
I have. And some people say, oh, well, you didn't do anything. You spent your whole career in school. That would be true if I'd only done like 10 or 15 years. But when you do 30 years, you can absorb all those schools.
And get trigger time.
And still get a lot of time on the road. Talk
to me a little bit about all the training you did. I've had, obviously chances to talk to lots of Navy SEALs. I've got SEALs in the family, and I've had a couple of people tell me the scariest thing they've ever done in training, and it was the same thing. What was the scariest thing you ever did in training? Something that ever was like, oh my God, this is awful.
Well, I think in the SEAL teams anyway, a lot of guys, I don't know why we do this, maybe because just Bud sucks, but the whole time in your budget, like, oh, if I just get through this, I'll have it made. Well, you think that's true. And then as soon as you check into the teams,
there's another thing.
I mean, you realize that, dude, that wasn't even like Bud's is JV when you get to the team, only because the expectations are so high and the train is moving so fast. And there's just absolutely zero tolerance for, what we refer to as shitbaggery. In Bud's, you just have to pass the evolutions, and they may think you're a dirtbag, but if you pass the evolutions, you continue on down the road and eventually you graduate. It's much harsher in a SEAL platoon or a SEAL task unit, and I assume it's the same in a Ranger company or an ODA. Once you get there, you're new, and particularly during the war years, when you roll up into a platoon and there's guys that have been 3-4 deployments, they've done X amount of hundreds of assaults or whatever. I mean, that's a daunting place to roll into. Anyway, so, what the hardest thing is just absolutely every evolution is a do or die, either physically or for your reputation. Because you only have to screw up one big thing, no kidding. That'll follow you in the SEAL teams forever. You may not get kicked out for it, but that'll follow you forever. You'll always be known as the one guy who accidentally loaded live rounds in his 160 or in his M60 instead of blanks. There was a guy that did that, and that's the guy had a name, or someone else had screwed up a Draeger and caused a guy to get a caustic cocktail. I mean, just, or accidentally shoot another guy, which has happened to us, both downrange and in training. So you only got to have one screw up and it'll follow you forever, and we all know that even though people say, oh, it's all right, you've recovered from it, you never actually recover from it.
Not from big ones.
Not from big ones. I mean, it sounds silly, but all the things that we did, I remember literally doing we did a 4 or 5 day recon. And to this point, we're so used to everything you're doing has got safeguards. At least there's somebody watching you to make sure you don't fall off that cliff, or there's someone watching you to make sure you don't, screw up the demo or so, I mean, you may not know it, but there's always some cadre that's keeping those boundaries on you, for safety. And we were at the end of this 4 or 5 day recon, stumbling around at nighttime. And the last thing we had to do before we got exfilled was climb this cliff. And it was actually my mistake. And I look at this map, I'm like, well, we just got to climb that. And I think we're at the LZ. Again, this is like before GPS. So, and we started scaling it, and it was straight up, it probably was 75 or 80 feet, but it was straight up. Everybody's tired. And the scariest part of that is get halfway through that, and you realize, I'm like, whatever it was, 2 a.m. I'm like, you know what? If I actually fall from this, I'm going to die, because there is no safeguards. You absolutely have nobody but yourself. And on top of that, if I fall, I'm probably going to kill 2 or 3 of the guys that are underneath me.
Yeah.
So that's not my proudest moment, but when you realize that, that's scary, because you always think, oh, someone's got my back. There's some sort of cadre watching, something like that.
Well, being on your own is...
every once in a while, you get to that spot, like they say, no one's coming to get you. It's, self-rescue.
Yeah.
I mean, that's every once in a while you get to that point where you realize it really, you have your entire life, that however long that's going to be, you actually have that in the palm of your hand.
Yeah.
Better or worse.
So basically it's pressure cooker the whole time. There's never a relaxation. It's kind of pressure cooker the whole time.
Pretty much. I mean, there are some fun times like you would think there are, skydiving days and stuff like that, but you can even screw that up, but it's rare.
Yeah.
But in every organization, and I only know special operations, that sounds pompous, but I don't know anything else.
Right.
So everything you do is purposeful, and you either do it right or you're a turd.
So, just so that I have this right, because I don't speak Army quite the same way. I don't speak Army at all, actually. But when you're talking about the equipment you're flying, we're talking about the dual rotor CH-46 that I'm used to, some tactical version of that. Or is it just you're hauling? Is there door gunner?
Absolutely. So, I bless Greg Coker, and I love the H6, and they're awesome, and everybody like that. Everybody should love what they fly.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised on, I've flown everything. I flew Blackhawks. I flew MH6s for a little while, just as like an introductory thing. I've flown every airplane. I've flown 50 or 60 types of airplanes, but the MH-47G in particular is just the world's baddest piece of machinery, known as the Iron Buffalo. I mean, and it's big. It's not slow, but it's big. It's not sexy like Little Birds. It's not, doesn't have a movie made about it. Like
is
Black
that the one
Hawk
that
Down.
looks like a CH-46, but it's got the turbines on the back?
Well, it looks like So the conventional Army version is called a CH-47F.
Right. Okay.
Tandem rotors.
Okay.
Twin
I just
engine.
want to make sure I was.
Twin engine. The ones the regiment flies are completely different animals. They look the same, but they've got more powerful engines. They've got 1,000-gallon fuel tanks on each side. Lots and lots of armor on them, terrain following radar, air-to-air refueling probe, forward-looking infrared radar, laser dark targeting.
So it's all the shit the Chopper should have had in the original build contract, but in order to get the deal, they didn't.
It's a bad, there's places, we joke about it, and, Little Bird guys hate the Chinook guys hate everybody, and so on. But, if you really break it down tactically, each one of those aircraft has such a particular mission that if you, instead of comparing them, when you realize how well they all work together, because you've got Gravy and his H6s, and the MH6s carrying the operators in, and they're getting in places we couldn't even think about getting a Chinook in, or even a Black Hawk. Once those guys are on the inside, setting internal security and kicking doors, now you got the Hawks that are doing their assaults, and then we can bring in a Chinook with 70 or 80 Ranger Regiment guys that are just stormtrooping doors all around. I mean, when you get that all in concert, you realize what an effective package the regiment as a whole is. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the culture between the different platforms is brutal.
Yeah.
Make no mistake.
Pretty tribal.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very, very divisive, very tribal. Nobody wants to be a little bird guy because they hate each other and they hate everybody. But they're the best in the world at what they do, whether it's AH6s, MH6s, the Hawk guys, whether it's the DAPs, or the lift version, best in the world at what they do. And the Chinooks are the same thing. So it's all the same mentality, but different platforms. And it's almost like the inter-service rivalries of yourself. If you just focus on what we were meant to do, what SEALs were meant to do, what Ranger Regiments meant to do, and focus on that, you realize, and I realize this is a mature perspective, but how well, they interact with each other.
Well, it's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah.
And you can't just buy a bunch of, you can't just be a rich country and buy a bunch of shit and make that happen.
Some countries have tried. I mean, there are countries who've tried to buy the aircraft.
Right, they can buy the aircraft, but all the talent that makes it all happen is a different deal.
I'll tell you what, I've often thought you could go out there and just grab me any conventional Army airplane. I'd strip down Black Hawk, strip down Chinook, strip down whatever, Huey or something like that. And we could take the guys from the regiment and put them in those those helicopters, and they could do a better mission than if you take average pilots and put them in top tier helicopters.
Yeah.
And it's not, the machinery helps us overcome lots of adversities, weather, terrain, enemy action, all that kind of stuff. But that's not the deal. The pilots and the hearts of the pilots and the crew chiefs and stuff, that's where it's at.
People underestimate, it takes work ethic, creativity, and discipline to hold a military together and be awesome. And I imagine if you took our military and put them in Russian equipment, put the Russians in our equipment, kick the shit out of them in a similar way.
Yeah, I never believe in the power of the machines. I believe in the power of the people.
Yeah, me too.
It's how you train them, and it's your heart.
Yeah, me too. And I see that everywhere in business too. People that focus on the talent have these great companies. That people don't focus on the talent have very ephemeral businesses. Talent's really the key.
Oh, absolutely. That's totally off track. I mean, that's just a leadership problem. You know that.
For sure. So you've not had to crash a helicopter in action before?
No, not really. No, we bashed some up pretty good, but nothing that didn't fly.
Have you? Tell us a little bit about how much damage one of these aircraft can take before it's
shocking amount of damage.
Let's hear it.
Maybe I can't speak intelligently on little birds of the Blackhawks, but a Chinook, it's doing a job. It's modified, but it's doing a job it was never originally designed to do. It was designed as a cargo helicopter to sling load. It was never designed to slam into the ground. At 200 foot per minute rate of descent, slamming into the desert 5 times a night, browning out at 200 feet. I mean, I have ripped landing gear off, landed on boulders, and crushed the bottom of the helicopter in where we're kind of like stuck on it, wondering, can we actually get off of it? We've hit the ground, rolled forward, crashed the probe and stuff through an adobe wall. Just
for those of you who don't know, it's got a big boom that sticks off.
It's got a 16 foot air-to-air refueling probe in the front. I've had friends of mine come into LZs and chop trees down with the blades. We've had guys
and keep on flying afterwards.
We've had guys go in to do air-to-air refueling, and actually chop the hose with the blade.
Yeah.
And make incredibly unstable. Still landed. Everybody lived and all that. I mean, I'm sure. Their telling of it was an obscenely violent flight to the ground. We've had guys rip all 4 landing gear off of them before. In fact, the same guy, this is a legend, and I can't recall his name, but it was before my time of the 160. But everybody would tell the story about it, that he was actually at Fort Benning flying Rangers around and heads down, messing around, with radios and stuff, and just hit just the right angle where it came in, hit a berm, and sheared all 4 gear off, and the helicopter just stopped, all running and everything. And the Rangers didn't know any different. It was just like a normal assault landing for them. So the ramp came down, they all hop out and set up security. Only then did everyone realize that he just ripped all the landing gear off. I mean, and it's gotten better since, we have learned how to operate in a really nasty, abusive assault environment. The beginning of the war, we were damaging helicopters, not even to enemy action, but environmentally, we were just tearing helicopters up from obstacles on the LZ, browning out at 200 or 300 feet. When you land 3 22-ton helicopters, 3 or 4 22-ton helicopters in the span of a football field with talcum powder dust.
Yeah.
You can't waffle around and take your leisurely time getting down. You have to get down, and damage just occurs. So, the technology, as I left the regiment, we were starting to get technology where it wasn't an auto land, but it was coupled up with a radar altimeter, and it would allow more civilized landing even in 0-0 conditions. But it's just kind of the nature of doing business at war is you're going to tear some helicopters up.
Were you in Afghanistan and in Iraq?
I was. I only did 2 deployments to Iraq. The rest were all to Afghanistan.
How many deployments in Afghanistan?
14.
You ever added up how much time you spent in country?
I did. I don't remember where it is, but I did at one time, and it was ridiculous. It was total. It was like 5-something years total in Afghanistan.
Tell me what was going through your head and heart when you saw the way we left Afghanistan.
I actually tried to be agnostic about it.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly spent a decent amount of time. I didn't get too emotional about it. I'm like, well, screw it. I'm like, I never want to go back there. And I found this odd because when I left, I purposely told everybody, to include my wife, I'm like, I'm not doing contracting. I'm never going back there. You couldn't pay me $1 million to go back to Afghanistan. Say you hate it. But on the other hand, much like everyone else, when you spent that much time there, it becomes less about the terrain and the people of Afghanistan and becomes more about, oh, well, I remember flying with Bink on this and there, and our B-hut was there. And I remember, so when you spend that much time there, unfortunately, I realized you do kind of have a heart for the place, because we built it.
You want it to survive.
Even the structures and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, we built it. Yeah. We built that stuff at Bagram. We built that stuff at Kandahar. We like physically, every deployment you go there, you would build something. So that was hard. And it was also really difficult for me. And I don't care about all the equipment. Honestly, this is probably the part where we get political. I'm like, I don't care about how many billions of dollars of equipment we gave them. I really don't care. The part that was disheartening and angering is, hey, we gave you everything to support yourself, and you don't even have to become a democracy. Just don't become a Taliban safe haven. We gave you everything that any country could possibly ask for, and you couldn't last a week.
Right.
Which tells me it tells me that I say you, the pronoun people, like the people of Afghanistan, you didn't even attempt, you didn't even attempt to make a stand.
We violated Star Trek's Prime Directive. You cannot get a primitive species to rise up just because you give them the stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's cultural. I'm not saying Afghans are a primitive human being. I'm saying they have a primitive culture. They have a primitive way of thinking. And
well,
I don't know if
we have any faults, it was making the assumption that they wanted the life that we wanted for them.
Right.
Again, I don't care how many billions we gave them and all that kind of stuff, because we piss away billions on several countries, not just Afghanistan, that don't deserve it.
Right.
So that's not the issue.
Who else do we piss away billions?
Oh my gosh. You should ask them. Now that I'm retired, you should ask somebody how many millions of dollars a month we paid Afghanistan to keep the one road open so we could bring trucks, fuel trucks and food trucks and stuff through Afghanistan.
Oh, you mean through Pakistan? Yeah.
At the time, and
I thought that was like $10,000 a truck or something crazy.
Well, it's like 10 or 15 years old in knowledge, but at that time, it was like 18 or 19 million a month.
Right.
To allow the truck's passage, and they still pilfered 20% or 30% or something like that.
Crazy.
So, anyway, so that was my heartache with seeing that in Afghanistan, and I'm heartless when I say the people didn't bother me as much as just the fact that, because what we saw at Kandahar Airport or Bagram Airport or whatever. That was the meat of the media news flash. There was a lot more going on. The fact that they allowed that to happen,
Right.
that was disheartening. But again, I think it's our fault. We assumed that they wanted the life that we were resourcing them for, and they don't. So it's very silent. I think those of us who spent a lot of time there, like we did over, basically I refer to the best years of my life from 31 until 45, I spent in Afghanistan every year I could count on it for, 2 or 3 deployments. It's pretty painful. Just, you want it to flourish. You don't want to see all the stuff that you physically built torn down. So
Yeah.
everybody's got different opinions on it, but I know several guys, that I flew with and stuff, we would kind of banter back and forth on Facebook or whatever. And we're like, yeah, it's a shame. Remember we set that bee hut on fire trying to cook toast or something, just memories like that.
Yeah.
And that was difficult.
It feels, look, I wasn't in Afghanistan, and it feels like we got built all this time and energy building a dam, and then the dam just got washed away. And, you just kind of, if you're really deep into a project and you have to start from scratch, or the whole thing's gone and you just don't go finishing the project, that's how it kind of feels, kind of vacant. I think about every time I had to count bullets in the Marine Corps. I think about every time we drilled over every little piece of gear and every little piece of equipment, and then we just walked away from
that $50 I had to pay for my poncho liner or something.
That's crazy. What's gone on the last 20 months in this country is it's been kind of hard for me to remain optimistic. I try
agree.
really hard to be optimistic.
I'm optimistic, but I keep it very narrow in scope. And I still think like I'm in uniform, so I'm like, well, I really can't say that, but I guess I can,
Yeah.
There's nothing more important to the success of America than security. And I don't mean that like in a political way, but the economy, consumer confidence, all that stuff depends on security. The stock market, it all depends on real or perceived, either physical or emotional security. And when you don't have that, things just start crumbling. And
I just feel like we're in this weird erosion because we have, people ask me to go speak at political events, and I go, I don't want you to do anything. I want you to do nothing. I want you to get rid of stuff. I think the only thing we should do is secure our country and make sure energy is affordable, and everything will sort itself out perfectly.
I actually agree with that. And it sounds simplistic, but I think it can actually be that simple.
Yeah, I think so
for
too.
the majority of stuff. And holy cow, could we get on a political rant? But I firmly believe in security. And I've told several civic groups, who don't believe in that. I'm like, just look at your town. If you're whatever town you live in, I don't care, Tempe, Phoenix is a different deal, but smaller towns, I'm like, if you don't have a robust law enforcement presence and EMS fire, if they're not keeping riffraff out of the town and taking care of speeders and all that kind of stuff, and elements start moving in, well, when those elements start moving in, nobody wants to move to your town because the schools suck. And if nobody's moving to your town, that means your tax base declines. And when your tax base declines, that means all your municipalities suffer.
Everything erodes.
And it's this vicious cycle. Yeah. And then nobody wants to move to your town, and right. So the one thing that fixes all that is security.
Right.
And I guess you probably needs to move out of the U.S. for a little bit and see what some nations look like that are not secure. Somalia, Horn of Africa, Afghanistan, Pakistan. Somebody needs to see that to understand truly. I laugh. They're like, oh, we're anarchy here. I'm like, give me a break. You have no idea what anarchy looks like.
Right.
In my hometown, which I won't even name, there's some jackhole who continues to fly the flag upside down. I don't care. I'm not going to talk to him. But I'm like, you really think the country is in distress? Do we have some inept and difficult leadership going on right now? Absolutely, but we are not in distress. If we really wanted to, we could take control and right the ship. So if you think we're in distress, you really don't have a clear vision of what it could be like.
Yeah, I've had people say to me, this is the worst it's ever been. I said, at Gettysburg, there was a lot of people across from a field with guns running at each other. January 6th was a beer fart in a windstorm. Has nothing compared to Antietam, Gettysburg, Vicksburg.
Talk to somebody. My mom talks about it every once in a while. Talk to somebody who lived through 1968.
Right.
You know, I
So
mean,
we're
the
talking about
country
Kent
literally,
State, Kent State and the protests that were going on in the country. I mean,
the country was literally coming apart at the seams, way worse than it is now.
right.
You know, I mean, talk to somebody who lived through that, you know, and their perspective on what's going on now. I mean, they'll say, yeah, it's a shame, but it's not like, you know, when the entire country is physically and emotionally, racially segregated, you know, with no hopes of binding back together, lots and lots of violence, all the animosity, you know, because of the Vietnam War and its effects and all that. I mean, that was a lot going on at that period, which is way worse than what we have going on now.
So let me talk to you. You know, I think we get a sense of the bricks that were laid to make the wall that is you, the building that is you. What do you see for yourself? Because, you know, you and I are about the same age. What are you going to do the next 10, 15, 20 years? You're going to fly airplanes and just kind of be a squinty-eyed old aviator?
Man, I'm trying to not be old and grouchy. So one of the big differences, one, you know, not to get too deep and meaningful on your show, but I'm trying to be.
We're pretty good with deep.
I mean,
and
I'm
meaningful.
trying to be a better husband and a better dad because I screwed that up, and there was.
Oh my God, I didn't do that well.
You know, and I say that because, like I said, I've got, you know, sons that are serving their country right now. My youngest is awesome. You know, he's going to Grand Canyon University here in Phoenix. But I spent the best years of their lives and the best years of my life gone.
In a helicopter, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought I was doing something that would make their lives better. Now, they learned a lot of lessons.
Sure.
I mean, both they and my wife are hard like woodpecker lips. You know, they're prepared. Whatever the country turns into.
Did you just say hard like woodpecker lips?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, they are hard. So I don't have to change the world. All I did was, you know, help grow my wife and my sons to deal with it. You know, and that's one way to look at it. But all the times I could have played with them, taught them more stuff, taken them to the range, like all those dad regrets. My oldest, the day before he left to go to Army basic training, you know, and on to infantry and Ranger school and all that kind of stuff. And so like his last couple of weeks at home, I tried to do the dad thing because I was finally out of the military. I had some time and I'm trying to do dad things, all these dad things. And he kind of looked at me at one point, and I'm probably paraphrasing, but he's like, hey, Dad, don't bother. And he wasn't being a jackass. He wasn't being snarky, but his point was, hey, why? He's like, why bother now? You know, you're not going to make up for the last 20 years in 2 weeks or a week or whatever it was. And that,
what were you trying to do with him?
well, you know, subconsciously as dad, you're like, hey, let's go shooting. Let's go fishing. Like all the things you like to do, let's go do it. And so we'll try and fix the last 20 years in this last 2 weeks. And, you know, that was probably the most impactful, sobering moment of my entire life. Because in that instant, you know, you realize this uniform with all this cool, shiny stuff and everybody thinks awesome and patting on the back and all that stuff, you know, like and all the people, all the mentors at that time who said, hey, just do one more deployment or, hey, just stay for a couple more years. And you know, what you want to do is you want to punch them in the throat and say, you lied to me. Now, it's really my fault. It's nobody's fault.
Right.
You know, I could have made a change at any time, you know, but
It was a cat's in the cradle moment, though, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't realize it at the time, but, you know, and I fell for it. I had one command chief warrant officer, you know, when I was like, hey, I need a break, you know, I need to go hang out with my family, which is dumb because everybody in the unit's got the same song and dance.
Right.
And you know, you think you're special, you're the only one. And he's like, hey, and he goes, I'll tell you right now, kids are like rubber balls, man. They're resilient. He's like, just give us a couple more years, you know, they'll bounce back from this. And I kind of I rationalized that with, heck yeah, you know, I'll go do 2 more deployments. You know, anyway, so that all goes away the night before he goes to basic training. You know, I'm laying in bed with him, petting his little head like I used to when he was little, you know, when I'd come home at like 3 a.m, smelling like gunpowder or jet fuel or whatever. And I'd kind of pet him or reverse the process when I had to leave at 3 a.m. and go on a deployment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, I did that totally wrong, completely wrong. And you can't ever fix that.
No.
And that's always what I tell younger guys.
Are the boys at peace with it?
They're old enough now, you know, we're in a different relationship, you know, like my oldest is married, middle's married. You know, youngest is what he is. He is definitely not married, but I'm I've apologized to them, and they're like, Dad, it's okay. We understand. They probably really won't understand until they're like 30 or so when they have their own kids.
Well, how old are your boys?
One is 28, one is 21, and
They're
one's
kids.
18.
They haven't even done their work yet. They
Yeah.
start looking in the mirror and looking at their own life, and they're going to come back and be mad for a while, and then they're going to. There's a whole process they got to go through.
Yeah, I mean, they'll, like I said, as they start raising their own family, they'll probably be like, okay, Dad's not crazy. Now, the funny part is my boys that are in the Army, several times they've come back now, and we have bonded over similar experiences.
Sure.
Which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, I thought you were just batshit crazy. You're not. This really does suck. So we've got that in common. But it still, as a dad, it still doesn't make you regret, missing all those times.
Right, it doesn't make up for all that.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's probably no different. It's probably more meaningful than some guy who's in sales or something like that, who's gone all the time and misses the family. At least you can rationalize it by saying, I did something that was useful or noble or whatever, but it doesn't make it hurt any less.
It's an old human story, right? That's why the Cat Stevens did the song in the 1960s, because we've all been bit by the ass. And if you're successful, it's hard to be there and that kind of present because you're out hustling. If you're out in the business world, you're out hustling and you are traveling. And yeah, I don't know. There's some lifestyles, but there's the lifestyles where the dads are home all the time is not a life I ever really wanted.
No, and then what's funny is I'm not a super self-help reader. I'll read a lot of tech stuff, a lot of history. I'm not a self-help reader, but I've read a couple books, talking about like what makes men tick, and it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if you're in sales or you're a mechanic or you're Navy SEAL or whatever. I mean, all men who have the correct genetics and upbringing, that's what we do. We have to have a purpose. We have to be accomplished. We have to know that our, wife, girlfriend, significant other, whatever, approves of us and, thinks we're attractive, thinks we're successful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all pressure we put on ourselves. But it's the truth.
And the nurturing lessons of a father are nice, but the lessons of dedication, success, hard work, and providing is a goddamn cornerstone of Western civilization.
It is. And the interesting point is I had crappy dads. I did. Like my birth dad I never met. My mom, married a succession of dudes. So there was always, some guys in the house, and none of them were worth anything. All of my positive male role models came well when the dads were gone,
Flying guys, men in the military.
Well, maybe not even flying guys, but just different people that I chose to emulate. But it certainly wasn't any man that was in my house.
Yeah.
So I guess somewhere along the line, there was guilt because I always promised myself, even as a teenager, all right, when I'm a dad or a husband, I'm going to do it correct because I've seen what it looks like, done incorrectly. And, I got some of that right, and some of it I screwed up. But at the time, you think you're doing the best you can do.
My parents are proud of me because they think I did it I did it a lot better than them. And I feel all the time, all these big gaps in what I've done. And I hope my kids do better. I mean, I think that's probably the self-aware progress of humans. And it wasn't 100 years ago. Most of us were poor everywhere. I mean, 100 years ago, World War I, this was a pretty primitive country. It was fried pork chops on a good day.
Yeah. Meat was rare.
Yeah. It's a very, very modern convention for us to kvetch over our child rearing shortcomings. Especially when you see the pictures, the black and white pictures of your, grandparents, folks from the turn of the century, and you see the hard look on their face. And then the hard bones, and you go, oh,
it's pretty easy. You look at those and you're like, I'm not hard.
Yeah. You look at that and you go,
I'm all right. I got air conditioning.
It was a different time then, you know? Yeah. Well, very cool. And if somebody, have you done a biography yet, or have you sat down and start writing your biography? Because you got a pretty cool life you've had.
It's a quandary, and everybody who listens will kind of laugh because I'm like, man, I've been told by several people, because I've done a lot of podcasts and a lot of leadership stuff. I'm like, dude, you've got to write a book. I'm like, yeah, but then everyone will hate me because every ex-SEAL writes a book, However, like I said at the beginning, I have started taking notes mainly because there's things that are starting to fade, and I never thought they would.
Yeah.
But there's things that are starting to fade that mean a lot. and I'm not talking about chest pounding war stories, just thoughts and episodes and stuff that shaped how, no kidding, like an uneducated fat band kid, joined the Navy, went through BUDS, spent X amount of times on SEAL teams, world's most elite helicopter unit, not being an overachiever. And I know it sounds coy, but just not being good at long division, not being college material. I mean, somehow I made it through that. And I truly believe, like I said, it's because of very specific, pivotal people throughout that 30 years. And so at some point I would like to tell that story, but using the framework of the people that came into my life, I was gifted with, blessed, came across, whatever, that made decisions or influenced me directly, and every one of those was a life-changing turn in the road.
It would be a really cool book if the name of 12 chapters, you had a 12 chapter book, and the name of each chapter was that person who did that pivotal
That's a good idea.
thing in your life, because it seems like that you've mentioned that several times and you've talked about that. And my Jeff, my right-hand guy here, I've heard him give the speech. He says, you're only going to be 2 or 3 people in your professional career that will turn the whole thing for you. You got to be aware when they come along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
that would be a great book though.
Yeah. And one of them wasn't even a man. One of them was a woman optometrist in the Navy, or I'm sorry, in the Army. And I do have to tell the story because it's a pretty funny one. So the Navy paid for me. I had horrible vision. There's no way I was ever going to be a pilot. Somewhere, I can't remember, mid-90s, something like that. The Navy had an experimental program for PRK, for SEALs and fighter pilots. Right. So I was like one of the first ones in line. So as soon as they gave me my PRK, I started looking for a way to get out of the Navy so I could go fly. Because that's really what I wanted to do.
Right, thanks for the eyeballs. I'm out.
But thanks for my new eyes. Thanks for my 2015. So when I did my initial flight physical to apply for warrant officer candidate school, right, and it was a Special Forces flight surgeon that did it for me.
That's usually a disqualifier.
Yeah, it is. At that time it was.
Yeah.
It's not now, but it was then, because you're talking like 2000, 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so it said, have you ever had eye surgery or something like that? And I looked at it and I'm like, well, he's like, don't worry about it. He goes, unless they map your eye, he's like, they're never going to know. And so I went through this whole deal. So I'm standing in line at Fort Rucker in processing, warrant officer candidate school. Like there's 100 of us or whatever. And we're standing in line at the optometrist office. And one of the first things you do is everybody gets a flight physical, right?
Sure.
To make sure you didn't sham the system. And, the medic stands out there and says, okay, everybody, you're going to get your eyes looked at, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to map your eye. I'm like, oh, shit. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so the guy behind me, I knew he was going to walk school with me. I don't remember his name. And I said, dude, but he was actually an enlisted, eye technician, whatever that is in the Army. I said, dude, what am I going to do? I said, I've had PRK. And he said, hang on a second. I used to work for this colonel, and I don't remember her name. I've got it written down because she's going to be in the book. And I don't remember her name, but he used to work for her, and she was in charge of this trial, experimental trial thing for the Army to accept flight school students with PRK. And so he actually stepped out of line because it was like a 2-hour line. He stepped out of line, walked around the corner, got her, Colonel whoever it was, and I still talk to her aide every once in a while because she's still at Fort Rucker. And he's like, all right, come with me. And I walked into her office and I'm like at attention and scared to death. I'm like, here it is. My career screwed. Like I just got rid of an awesome Navy SEAL career. Yeah. And at that time they wouldn't send you back. You're just done. Like enlisted, you go out to the Army to serve your 4 years or whatever. And her words out of her mouth exactly were, so I hear you'd like to be enrolled in my experimental program. I'm like, yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And this is all happening as dudes are going down the line getting checked. And so on the spot, she enrolled me in this program and she said, oh, as I'm on the way, I'm like, thank you so much, ma'am. And she says, oh, by the way, Mr. Rutledge, we'll make an appointment and we'll talk about the apparent integrity issue at hand here. And she wasn't joking about it, but she saved my career. I mean, can you imagine?
Did they actually map everybody for PRK?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so she stood there when they mapped my eye. She's like, oh, he's in the program. Go ahead and give him a waiver. But that was in like 20 minutes of this whole story being completely different. I've got her name written down.
Holy smokes.
I remember
I'd have her name tattooed on your shoulder.
Yeah, if I will find her at some point. But I do remember her assistant was a woman named Gina Bissett. And she was always, every time I'd come in, to get eyes redone, she'd be like, "Oh, it's our integrity issue." I mean, kind of jokingly,
Yeah.
but that was always a reminder. I mean, this close to having a career completely altered. And then, but I went on to have a highly successful, aviation career in the Army. But talk about someone, there's two I just gave you in this podcast, two right there that just completely changed the entire trajectory of not only a career, but very likely my life.
That's the book, man. That is the book.
I honestly wish, my boys suck them out of me every once in a while, but I wish I had good chest pounding stories, war stories and stuff.
Sure.
And I have them, but they always come out in the flavor of, wow, we were getting shot at this. And then the guy looks over and says, "I'm hungry," or something. I mean, like the focus is not the actual war story.
Right.
It's just something, it's just a vehicle for something silly or stupid that happened to be going on at the time.
Well, to be able to tell the story and traverse a career and have other people read it and go, "Oh, I know what he's talking about," or have someone young read it and go, "I read this thing about that." Turning points.
Yeah, I like I said, I wish I had awesome, war stories. There I was with Bin Laden. I mean, I just don't have any of those. And always brought everybody home safe, which I guess that's a feather in the cap anyway, I did have a corpsman that got shot one time, and he's actually, unfortunately, he has since passed, by his own hand a few weeks ago, but stemming from those injuries and that. But, I just don't have any nothing that would be movie worthy, I don't think. Just lots of stories that were possible because of people, not machines, not, "Hey, I did all these awesome things," not, "I trained Chris Kyle," or something like that, which is like some stupid stuff Brandon Webb would say.
That is he has said that to me.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, "Oh, I taught him how to
I can say it. Yeah. We won't there's not one single team guy that has anything good to say about Brandon Webb.
Oh no.
And if they do, nobody hangs out with those team guys.
All I know is I met him at Gillespie Field at the fly-ins we used to have out there, Bones Fests, and I'd met him a couple of times, and the aviator types were like, "Oh, he's an aviator."
Yeah. That doesn't mean, it doesn't mean he was a good pilot, but
I didn't do any tactical flying with him, so I don't know.
Yeah,
I didn't do any flying with him.
I don't know. I will say he was probably the first to understand the value of branding, of self-branding. So I will give him that, and his media exploits and all that.
He and Marchenko, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, the post 9/11.
Oh yeah, okay.
He was
of the youngsters.
He was of the youngsters. He was the first one to figure out how to make that brand stick, and once you're in the marketplace, it's really kind of hard for anyone else to get in it. So he understood that, and he was a visionary, for that. It's just, he sold out a lot of the integrity of the teams to do so.
Well, that's too bad. Everybody down there in that Southern California world can end up getting more gravity on them. Bruce Lee didn't really deserve the heat he got. Ronda Rousey, she didn't deserve the heat she got. There's a lot of people in Southern California because it's such a media hub and there's so much hip, cool, and trendy that happens out of SoCal for the whole country. Odd people get the headline.
And I will say, when you see soft guys, girls, whatever, when they write stories, I don't read them very often, and I don't care who they are, Ranger Regiment guys, SF guys, whatever. The ones you read are the ones that take the time to make sure it's an accurate story, because what a lot of pressure to write something or even do a podcast or something like that, knowing that all of the brotherhood, I don't care, it could be in the 160th, it could be SEAL teams, whatever, that all the brotherhood is watching, making a judgment, did he or she accurately represent the teams or represent the regiment, or, are they telling a story favorably, or is it just a spotlight, so he can get his 15 minutes of fame, get his book out,
Yeah.
Whatever, have 1 million followers on Instagram or something like that. And it's pretty rare. There's a handful of guys out there that do it right, and they do justice. There's a few out there, like we talked about, where I'm more interested in the notoriety of the money, the media, than I am accurately, representing the breed. And my boys know this. And I told them from day one, not to be coy, but I'm like, Dad's not a hero. I said, I'll tell you what, the dudes who changed the course of American and military history since 9/11, that actually have done deeds that are so incredible and so complex and almost unhuman, like, you'll never, ever hear of them, ever. And it's not because, they don't want a pat on the back or anything. They probably do, but they're the type of people that are not trying to get accolades for them. One of the groomsmen in my wedding, 5 years ago or so, retired from SEAL Team 6. Just the quietest, funniest, goofiest dude. I went through buds with him too, and we were roommates and so on. But an absolute pipe hitter at war, and just multiple deployments, all the big stuff you see in the news, he and his squadron were on. But a funnier, quieter guy, you're not going to find. And he's just one of, hundreds across, like I said, the Ranger Regiment, the ODAs, the CAG guys, the rest of SEAL teams. So that is my reluctance. If I have a reluctant, or if I have any hesitations in writing a book or something like that, it's because it's a lot of pressure to tell the story to where it accurately reflects, the spirit of everyone involved.
Yeah, I get it. I think you have a unique perspective because of the way you think about it. And you can almost tell the career story without getting into the nuts and bolts of all of the responsible details, and just saying, this is what you should be looking out for, young man, in your life. There are these flags that come up along the way, because that's impactful. The war story books aren't very impactful, quite frankly.
I think they're short. I think you read them, you're like, oh, that was horrible, but you don't retain it.
Right.
It's not like a life lesson you retain or anything. You're like, gosh, well, I hope I'm never in a Hilux getting shot at, or something stupid like that.
Well, you've got a fun perspective, and one of them is know what you want to do, ask, push, see what happens, and get lucky.
That is what I tell people. Because I still do a lot of mentorship with young people. Mm-hmm. They're either trying to get into SEAL teams, or they're trying to get, in the 160th, or I still write letters of recommendation for guys trying to go to flight school. And heck, I've been retired 3 going on 4 years. And I tell them, like, dude, nobody's going to do this for you. Absolutely nobody. I said, so here's this whole list of things to do, and I'm not going to help you with it. You said you wanted to do this. Here's how you do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody, and it's kind of I've almost got it memorized now. I can get it down to like a 2-minute elevator speech. Like, everybody is spring loaded to say no, because it's easier. I said, you only got to find one person that'll say yes. So if that guy tells you no, find out who his boss is and ask him. And if he tells you no, and you will understand when you get to a certain point when no means no.
Yeah.
I said, but you don't want to go spend the rest of your life doing the whole, I wish I woulda, coulda, shoulda, wondering, well, if I'd just asked that one more person, maybe they would have said yes.
Yeah.
There's, I heard a quote the other day, and I don't quote much, but, a guy said, and he goes, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And that is true. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be, a chest beater, but I run across frequently, when I was kind of on the speaking circuit and stuff, and I run across lots of guys, ironically, that are my age, 50s, kids or teenagers, or they're now empty nesters, something like that. And they are living a daily life of silent regret. They may have good job, they make $500,000 a year or whatever, but they are living lives thinking, I wish I would have tried this, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So when I talk to young people, I'm like, dude, this is the time. You're 19, you have no wife, no kids, no responsibilities. I said, this is the time, like this 5-year period between now and 25. If you want to chuck everything and go live in hostels and hike the Himalayas, I'm like, this is the time to do all of your stupid stuff.
I tell young people also that everybody up the chain is looking for someone to say yes to. We're all looking for somebody who's got the balls and the juice to ask. Everybody who is in a no or yes position is looking for the right person to say yes to. And I tell them they're going to say no because they don't want to take a risk, but be the one they want to say yes for. And I think about it in every career, whether you want to go be a fighter pilot. Everyone thinks it's just some unattainable, far off theory. That's what I got my whole life. Oh, you're a fighter pilot. You don't come fighter.
I always say, I'm like, I can't be the dumbest person to have ever tried this. I mean, I had to break it down, pretty Barney Purple simple. I'm like, I'm not a smart dude. And if that guy did it, I'm sure I can do it.
Yeah, I'm like, well, shit, those guys are morons. If they're doing it, I ought to be able to do it too.
Side note. So at my 160th assessment, you have to take the psych eval, right? And this intelligent IQ exam.
Sure.
And I'm sitting in front of the psych, and his name is Doc Franklin. And everybody knows him. He's since retired, but legend. And he was just point blank, and I'm thinking I'm the cock of the walk. And he's like, so how do you think you did on your IQ test? Oh. And I'm like, well, I think I'm trying to be political, I'm like, well, I think I did pretty good, sir. He's like, no, well, he goes, how do you think you did? I'm like, well, I'm not the smartest guy. So, but he goes, hey, listen, how do you think you did? I said, well, I think I did well. He goes, well, he goes, you're not going to fly the space shuttle, but you did okay. So that was like my stab of mediocrity. And he wasn't exaggerating. He's like, yeah, he goes, you're not top tier in this position. He goes, it's a good thing you're hard,
Fantastic.
Yeah. So
fantastic.
If that's motivation for anybody who doesn't think they're good enough, and keep in mind that every one of these positions I've ever been to, the whole time I was in SEAL teams, the whole time in the 160th, at West Point, I've suffered from now what I've been told is, imposter syndrome. I didn't even know what it was.
Right.
When someone explained it, I'm like, that's it. I'm doing the job.
I'm taking it.
Oh, yeah.
Waiting until we're going to find out that I'm a fraud.
Oh, yeah. And, anybody who kind of knows me on the outside who doesn't really know me, they're like, oh, he's awesome. He's super confident, proficient. On the inside, really, I'm like, dude, everybody's watching and to think I'm going to screw this up. And that's how I managed most of my successes, is being scared enough of screwing up, to just do it. But, just imagine the quality of individuals in the SEAL teams, in the 160th that I'm surrounded with. Guaranteed they're surrounded by all kinds of people that are way better than I was. I kind of just made up for it with effort instead of talent or initiative and effort. And, and then you get to West Point, surrounded by Ivy League people. I'm like, certainly they're going to find me out. So yeah, imposter syndrome for 30 years. And if nothing else, I guess that was my motivating factor.
That's pretty funny. I had the weird blend of a mom that gave me lots of affection and said I could do anything, and my dad would whoop my ass on a short stroke. And so I had that weird blend. I was like, oh my God. All the time I was like, oh my God, don't let anybody. People say, oh, you must be really proud of your company. I'm like, actually, I just go to work and make sure I keep working in case when the axe swings, my head's down working and it misses me.
Yeah. How important, to turn the tables, how important is it to hire hard and manage easy? Because that's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, I am not a super dude, but I am a wicked judge of talent.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of my strengths here.
Yeah.
Just 9 people come through, and how'd I pick the one that I bring in? Because they could mess everything up pretty easily.
Yeah.
Well, listen, fantastic having you in, and I hope we connect outside of here, out in the aviation world.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me rant for a little while.
Yeah, good times. When you're ready to promote your book, let me know. All right.
I will. You'd be the first one.
Cool. Well, you guys, Mike Rutledge here with a really cool background across 2 Special Forces communities, which you don't hear too often. Pretty neat. We're going to talk off camera, and he's going to tell me some behind-the-scenes scoop about all different kinds of people, so all you guys fucking be jealous. That's the Greg Medford Show. Thanks for coming in and joining us. Check us out on Spotify. Check us out on iTunes. Check us out on Rumble. I know you're probably seeing a lot of you kind of find us on YouTube. You can jump over to there to see the unedited and the unthrottled and the uncensored versions of everything we do here. I'm out, folks.